You know how society seems so repetitive nowadays? Like, how everything feels so tailored and nobody seems to bother. That's because people do not think for themselves. Surely not, right? According to the billionaire Ross Perot, there are two things you can never pay a person to do: think and do things in the right order. Now, I'm not talking about conscious decision making here. I'm talking about imagination. Let's look at a good example: Hitler and the Nazis.
I'm sure you know the story by now. A man with a silver tongue who hated Jews became motivated enough to convince an entire country to go to war, simply based on reasons twisted by his ego and a good sprinkle of superiority complex. Doesn't that just sound ridiculous?
And yet, it actually happened. Did Hitler think all of that up in his head? Who knows? There are many other instances in history of well-voiced men persuading the crowd into following their delusions of grandeur. There's Genghis Khan, Joseph Stalin, Kim Jong-un, Mao Zedong, Osama bin Laden, and etc. Most of them went down as bad guys, but even a few notable figures who were admired used others in a similar sense, albeit having ended with better reputations. Just think of Jesus Christ, Sun Tzu, Plato, Martin Luther King Jr., Winston Churchill, or Gandhi. You, the leader, the entrepreneur. In this scenario, you must do all of the logical work. People do not think with their higher brains when they are left to their own devices. They're vulnerable to outside influence and distractions. Sure, they'll be thinking about their next meal, how hungry they are, how tired they are, how they wish they were doing something else, or maybe their lover, spouse, or child. But they won't be thinking about you or the tasks you've assigned them. Most people are belief collectors rather than rational thinkers. They simply take ideas based on trust from sources that they respect, and they then develop an unshakable belief in those ideas which cannot be overturned by any amount of proof that they're wrong. The trouble is that belief collection is an extremely successful strategy, as it gets people to the top quickly without them ever having to do any real thinking work. But it also leaves them totally ill-equipped to be able to tell the difference between right and wrong ideas. Our education systems are designed to reward belief collectors, people who just absorb everything and regurgitate it on demand. This is where all those great individuals I mentioned earlier differed. They leverage people's tendency of putting faith and trust above rationality to their advantage, whether intentional or not. And Hitler was by far the most successful figure in human history to gain that leverage with the power of words. This grim truth about humanity is also why governments, religions, colleges, universities, the media, and other institutions easily influence people's thoughts and opinions. They do not try to think for themselves and only focus on upfront gains and losses. As a result, when someone else tells them what to do, what to think, or what to feel, they comply. Perhaps people confuse thinking with self-worth or acceptance at times. To feel good about ourselves, we unconsciously adopt another's feelings, viewpoints, and ideas. Taking on some perspectives may be popular or considered heroic, whereas otherwise may be viewed as socially unacceptable. We want to think of ourselves as optimistic, important, and a good individual. So we embrace these ideas without thinking them through once we see value in doing so. People cannot completely comprehend the importance of thought or what it means to think for themselves, and that implies that you must really work for your own thoughts. You can't just believe everything one person tells you. You have to consider everything, and it soon becomes too complex. Black and white dissolve, leaving only thin strips on either side of a near infinite wall of gray. You begin to notice bigotry. You notice not only the good and bad, but also the why, how, and when. You realize that you are nearly alone in the world. Your ideas become grounded in reality as opposed to fantasy or ideology. All of a sudden, you're basically pulled from the matrix and everything drives you insane. What would you do? What would others do? Regress and go back? Of course you can do that, but by then, how you see society would have changed. You can't help but notice all the small details and knowing where they would lead and how they would bloom, or maybe how to exploit them. What we can take from this is that although we've evolved as a species to be conservative and that to follow the crowd is to be safe, individuality and independence are what embody the significance of your own idea. Have you ever wanted to speak out? To voice your thoughts about a certain topic? Or even to commercialize your personal passion? Stagnancy begets absolutely nothing, but it is familiar. We may continue in doing things as we've always done. There's nothing wrong with that. But hopefully, after you've listened to this, consider trying harder the next time a chance to do so presents itself. Use your experiences and imagination to find a way to indulge yourself in the activity. You never know if you would be the next Napoleon Bonaparte or Alexander the Great. So think. See the world not as it is, but what it could be. And you might just find more than you could have ever imagined.